Hi, everybody, and welcome to Game Changer Chats. It's another exciting conversation. I'm Tevis Trower, and this is a part of a series that I created just to talk to everyday folks who have found ways throughout the course of their lives to align with what their heart says and to move forward in such a way that is true. And I'm really thrilled to have my guest today, Nilima Bhat. Nilima is a change maker. She's a change agent in the corporate world. She is the creatress of Shakti Leadership, and it is a book that she co-wrote with the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism, Raj Sisodia, who's a fabulous human being as well. I'd love to get him on here. Attention, Raj, I'm coming for you. But she's much more than that. Not that that's not a ton as it is. And I wanted to share her with all of you because her life journey is such an inspiration and a source of insight, I think, for all of us, in terms of how do we move through whatever venue of life we are in such a way that we are true to ourselves. And so I'm thrilled to have you here, Nilima.
Great to be here with you, Tevis. I wish we were together in person.
Oh my goodness. You just wait. I'm going to get you here in Woodstock, and we're going to drum, and we're going to walk the labyrinth and do a ceremony of fire and some Shakti dancing. We're going to burn it up. And one thing I do want to say, for anyone who's watching and you feel inspired to chat and stuff, for some reason the chat function on Facebook Live is a little bit glitchy at times. So if you're posting things and I'm not acknowledging it, it's not because I don't want to, it's because it's not coming through the feed. So if there's a burning question that you want answered real time and you're on Facebook, pop over to LinkedIn and put in my name, and this live should come up. And if not, I know that as soon as we're done, we'll go into the threads on Facebook and we'll follow up with anything that might not have appeared on screen. So that's my little technical support message. So Nilima, my favorite way to start these conversations is to ask whoever I'm with, what was your very favorite thing to do as a child that just lit you up and made you so happy?
Dancing. I discovered one day that I was a dancer, just like that.
Well,
and
put us there. I want to be in the room with you.
So we were in Germany. My father was building a ship for the Indian Navy called Shakti, if you please.
Go figure.
That's where my journey with Shakti must have begun, I guess. I was barely 7 or 8 years old. And this was the time of, I don't know how many of you know how Germany used to be in the 70s. And there was this disco and hit parade. And there were these really nice music shows on TV. And whatever was the pop song of the week, I would start dancing. And then before I knew it, everyone would be saying, hey, you're a great dancer. And so it was like a double delight. Like, I loved the fact that I was dancing. I enjoyed it so much. And the fact that, people seemed to notice the fact that I could dance.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a validation.
That's my
yes. Well, I'm curious. Were you just kind of free forming, or were you doing moves that you had seen somewhere? Were you just following your body's instinct?
Interesting question. I found myself to be something of a move maker. And that led to becoming a choreographer as I grew up. So I enjoyed moving my body, but I also enjoyed making up steps.
Oh, making it up. That creativity. I love it. I love it. I love it. Did anyone in your family dance? Like, was this something they modeled, or it just spontaneously came out of you?
It was spontaneous.
Oh, I love that. Isn't that amazing that as a young child, how old do you think you might have been when this started?
I said somewhere between 7 and 8.
Yeah. That urge to self-express is so unfettered right at that age. It's really beautiful. So
And
you,
dance went on to define me, if I
yeah,
have to say, who am I at the core of my being? I would say I'm the crazy dancer.
the crazy dancer, which the cosmic dancer of Shiva, right, is all over. Well, so you have been dancing your entire life, both figuratively and literally, and I kind of want to give people a sneak peek into what it was like to grow up in Germany, right across countries, as the daughter of a shipbuilder. What was that like?
I think going to Germany at that age was one of the best things that happened to me and our family. Being in the Navy, Indian Navy, in any case, you have a very cosmopolitan upbringing because you get posted around every 2, 3 years. And then that's normally within the country of India, but then to go to Germany for a couple of years and then to drive around all of Europe in our summer holidays and to see all these different countries and cultures back in the 70s when people didn't travel that much. So it was huge. It
Yeah.
was amazing. I think both my sister and I, we're only two of us, we kind of found ourselves and we came into our own. We just became super confident kids.
Yeah.
And being in the Navy, in any case, you grow up very, adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start new schools every 2, 3 years, make new friends every 2, 3 years. And I took that very well. I loved it, actually. I think now I get bored. I've been here in Mumbai 7 years, and I'm beginning to feel antsy now, saying, don't we have some place to go?
Well, plus both of us are used to spending significant time traveling. So I know that for those of us who have that in our dharma, right, in this lifetime, this has been a really interesting time to stay put.
Yeah. But for me, it's been a blessing because since the book Shakti Leadership came out in 2016, I've had like wings, and the wheels under my feet. I mean, I get exhausted thinking about the number of countries I've been and the beds I've slept in. Like, if it's Tuesday, this must be Belgium. If it's Wednesday, this must be Rome, right? And to the point that this last trip, which I had to cut short and come back to India because of the pandemic, I'm so glad it happened because I can't imagine how I would have done the next 3 weeks.
Oh,
I
wow.
kind of had been traveled out and I was like,
Yeah.
all I want is to go home and rest and have nowhere to go. And I must say it lasted 6 months
Mm-hmm.
until this last Sunday when I said, enough, I need to get into a car and go somewhere, anywhere. And so we drove into the Western Ghats. These,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if India on the West Coast has this lovely set of hills.
Mm.
I was born there.
Oh.
So every time I go there, I just feel refreshed. So that happened this Sunday.
The motherland. Yeah. Well, so here you are, this kid with a very broad exposure to culture and human beings of every type and stripe. That you kind of found your way into corporate communications. It seems like that's kind of a natural follow-on.
It's so interesting. It wasn't so natural, because in
Really?
India,
Okay.
well, in India, if you have any kind of brains, you're supposed to go take science or either become a doctor or an engineer. And if you don't want to do that after your 12th grade, then you go for undergrad studies and do a science degree, a BSc. So because I hadn't really discovered my purpose at 18, I went and did a BSc in life sciences and biochemistry. And oh my gosh, my entire class, after graduating, left for Caltech, Duke, and you name it, all the major Ivy Leagues, the great centers of research in the US and Europe, and except me. And this is after coming second in the university. My best friend came first and I came second. And
birds of a feather, right? Birds of a feather flock together.
And no, but they all left, including her. And I was like, I can't spend my life in a lab doing centrifuges and petri dishes and looking at E. coli. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how did I even get here? And thank God, by this time, I was 21 and I was beginning to see that I'm much more of a communicator. My academic career had been paralleled by my stage career. I'd always been on stage. Either I was choreographing or I was dancing or I was comparing, I was speaking. I've been on camera right through. And I just love communicating, and not just mass communicating, but actually interpersonal communication. It was like I started pondering over all the problems of the world, and I realized it's all about communication.
Yeah.
Breakdown of communication, misuse of communication, miscommunication. So I said I want to do something with communication. And so I did a postgraduate diploma in what's called social communications media studies. And so we had radio, TV, journalism, advertising, film, public relations. And my husband happened to be teaching the advertising course. But that's not how I met him. Otherwise, that would have been super scandalous. Because we got married a week after that course finished. And but I'd already met him when I was in my undergrad. And, anyway, he's 5 years older. That's another story. Yeah. But because I had this kind of naval background, and then all the naval kids are getting into corporate careers and doing their MBAs. And, so somewhere I thought, even though I'm doing communication, I need to be more corporate. I had that thing about being
I know. The validator, right? The validator. If I'm corporate, I'm real.
Yes. And that can be taken seriously, right? Yeah. There's nothing fluffy about it. So of all the subjects I studied, the one that had the most corporate angle was corporate communications and PR. And so that's what I chose. I could have chosen advertising, but Vijay, my husband, was already in advertising. And they said, you don't have both in advertising, it doesn't work. So there were these strange reasons. Look at all these reasons.
They said, right? The famous they.
So I got into corp comms, and because we got married so quickly, we got moved to Bangalore, and with Vijay's company, he was sent to head Ogilvy's office in Bangalore. And so my first job was after I got married, and it was with the Windsor Manor Sheraton. It's an ITC Sheraton hotel, and it was a huge experiment by this young, general manager who'd just taken over, Nakulan. And then he says, "Hey, what do we have to lose? It's an experiment. Let's see." They didn't have a PR person, and I kind of sold them the job. I said,
so you made your own role.
Yeah. I said, I can do all this for you.
Yeah.
And they paid me a pittance, and I was just happy to have, a blank slate to do whatever I wanted. And I had the most creative time of my life, 4 years of being allowed to do everything from making in-house training films to creating an anthem for the hotel that is still sung today.
An anthem for a hotel.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Because, hotels are, I don't know how much you know about hotels, if you've ever worked for one. I was very surprised. It's almost like the military.
Yeah.
Because behind the scenes, you have to be completely sharp. And there is clearly the behind the stage, the back office and the front office, And when you open the door and you enter the floor, you're on stage.
Yeah.
And then behind the scenes, you have to kind of beaver away and feverishly get things done so you show up looking smart and spiffy.
Yeah.
So it was all about, belonging to this institution. That's what it was. The Windsor Manor is still an institution. And,
Down Abbey, right? It makes me think of Down Abbey, right? So I'm privy to a little bit about your life. Obviously, I spent 9 months as part of a fellow in the Shakti Fellowship, which, if you're not aware of that and you're seeing this, I encourage you to look it up, because it's one of the many creations that you have put into the world. But before we dive into that, at some point, the study of yoga, and not asana, not like, oh, I'm going to do 50 downward dogs kind of yoga, but really the study of the philosophy of union and connection to source became a big influence in your life. And I know that that's a love and a passion that you and I share. But I'm curious how that happened, if that was from your family, if it came to you on your own. I had a feeling. I was meditating on this, and I was like, I have a feeling she just did this herself.
So I was brought up very secular. In a very religious country, right? I mean, we have so many religions, and it's a free country to practice your faith. And my parents, because they came from different parts of the country, one from Orissa, one from Maharashtra, they spoke different languages, and neither of them were religious. And the Navy is extremely secular anyway. So none of us even asked each other, what's your religion? What's your caste? What state do you come from? We were all just Indian kids. That was our identity, right?
Yeah.
And so I knew nothing. I knew nothing about my own roots and my own Indic wisdom until I got to 32. By this time, I had the kids, one boy, one girl, and we were posted to Singapore. And I was doing like the work of my life. I'd spent 10 years working. I was heading corporate communications for ESPN Star Sports across 25 countries in Asia Pacific. I thought I'd arrived. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Lovely. And I was only 32. And, the paycheck comes and goes into the bank, because my husband, was at the height of his career as well. So it was all a bit of la la land. It's like, this is too good to be true. Something's got to give, right? As we teach in the hero.
Oh God. Yes. Yes. Hubris, right? Ka-chung.
Yeah. And so, sure enough, I think just in time, because I was already beginning to feel, who am I and what am I doing with my life? I'm earning a fat paycheck.
That voice. Nilima, what are you doing? What are you doing?
What I didn't tell you is I've always had a sense of destiny. Like before I was born, my mother had been told that her younger kid is going to like do things like in the world and like something significant. And so it had been kind of, put into my head. Yeah. And I always had a sense that I'm here to make a difference.
Yeah.
And overnight, my boss, since you have this whole spiritual background, a very dear friend who I consider a spiritual mentor, she kind of persuaded me to buy this Tibetan tanka, which is this very powerful mandala painting. Yeah. And the day I brought it home, my life turned topsy-turvy. That's it. I know there was life before the tanka, and then there was life after the tanka, right? And overnight, I went from being the blue-eyed girl of my boss to someone who just couldn't do anything right.
Wow.
And even as I was doing the best work of my career. So it was such a dissonance. I didn't know who I was anymore. And that's when a dear friend and colleague, she said, Sally Vaughan, she said to me, Nilima, you must go do yoga, You're asking questions like, who am I and why am I here? And there must be more meaning to life. And like Jerry Maguire, I made copies of this executive summary of The Hungry Spirit by Charles Handy.
Yeah.
And I went and gave it to my boss and the whole board and saying, there's more to life and our spirit is hungry. And they all just glazed over. They had no idea what I was talking about. And so then she says, go take up yoga. So luckily by this time, we moved to London. And soon as I settled into London, I looked for a yoga studio nearby. And I found the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Center in Putney, 15 minutes down the road from us in Wimbledon. And I could drive out my little car and I could get into Putney and then drive back. It was just seamless. I mean, back then, yoga wasn't a thing, right?
Yeah.
It hadn't yet arrived on the world scene.
Yeah.
And there were people who had to find a yoga class. They would come halfway across the city of London to come to Putney. And I just had this 15-minute drive.
Fabulous.
So anyway, one look at Swami Shivananda's picture on the wall, and that was it. I just remember it was like coming home.
Yeah. I think those moments of kind of recognition, right? And I love it that you prefaced it by sharing the challenges that happened as you started to change, even though you were still doing great work, et cetera. Something about the energy was such that you were kind of being encouraged to question everything, right? You started questioning already, but I love it how so much of what we engage in is influenced by an energetic resonance, right? And so for you to go through, I'm this great yuppie. This is before that phrase existed, right? But I'm this yuppie and we're so successful and everything's great and blah, blah, blah. And your heart starts speaking to you saying, hey, don't forget about me, right? Things start to fall into place. They get messy and uncomfortable, which is the nature of renewal. And you walk into a yoga center and something about it feels like home. What does home really feel like? What did it feel like in that moment? Because I want to encourage people to pay attention to those feelings when they happen. A lot of times we just kind of try and hit the snooze button and go back to whatever metabolic system we've created in our lives. And I just love it that you are really highlighting that there was a shift.
Yeah, I think it's a sense of inner congruence. You just suddenly feel like you locked in or docked in to your track.
Yeah.
It just feels so right. It goes to your deepest sense of right.
Yeah.
That this is who I am. This is where I come from. And this is how and where I vibrate.
Mm-hmm.
It's that resonance.
It's like a cellular yes.
Yeah.
Yay.
And this was in the year 2000 that I saw his picture and I started doing my level 1 and level 2. And sure enough, the day I did my, basic meditation course, they announced the day it ended that, next week is Guru Purnima. And if any of you want to receive your mantra diksha for initiation, for your meditation, please come. And it was almost as you believe and know this, that you can look back on your life and you can see the synchronicities and you can see that there were no accidents. There was some strange invisible hand that seemed to have maneuvered everything just so. So literally from that crisis of awakening, the Tanka onwards, my life just took off.
So this is so beautiful because this ability to reflect on almost there being an invisible thread, right? An invisible hand that creates that we can't always see our journey while we're in it, right? And while we're like in it, right? And right now, the whole world is kind of, right? And so I feel like those words that you have just shared can really serve as a source of comfort and a reminder to all of us that we may not be able to see the beauty of this narrative right now, right? We may not be able to see it, but it's there.
And then it continued, right? Where 2 years into my yoga practice, and again feeling like we're in another blissed out la la land, now we're in London, and now we get to travel the world, and we did a Kenya safari, and kids are going to these very proper English schools and kind of trying to fit into this very British life, and I started this organization in the UK to promote Indian craft arts, threatened Indian craft arts, and to bring them to the world. It was called Art for Everyday Living, with very beautiful Indic modern design intervention. And so it was all looking wonderful. But, my husband went for a routine checkup and discovered he had colon cancer. Just literally 2 days before our Christmas break, all bags are packed, ready to fly to India for this lovely, vacation. This was the year 2001. And so very quickly, my journey went from being the yoga journey of just self-awareness and, fitness and holistic well-being, went to becoming a search for an integrative approach to help Vijay heal through his cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it brought back all my own education in life sciences and biochemistry and immunology that I thought was a waste because I went off into mass communications and PR.
Yeah.
And now it all came back. And both Vijay and I just completely embraced the journey to say, what can we do to make sure this thing doesn't come back? He had his surgery. He had his colon removed. But I guess I've just dived right in to the next part of how life then changed completely, not just for me, but for him and therefore us as a family.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm curious about, above and beyond, it's impossible in hindsight, I'm sure, to say if you had or hadn't had the spiritual training that you had started to give yourself, if you would have been able to transition so smoothly into this new reality. But one thing I've been observing, because I have a number of friends who are either going through health crisis or their partner is, and I, like the way you talk about it, it just sounds so, I'm just going to adjust, right? And so I'm curious, and not to sound like I want you to go dark or negative, but I think that there's wisdom and blessing and support to be had too by hearing, was that scary? Were you freaked out?
But you made such a good point that it's almost as if the universe lined up my yoga anchor.
Yeah.
And just when I was sufficiently anchored within, the cancer came.
Okay.
And everything that we did was because of my anchoring in yoga, including finding the Chinese medicine doctor that the yoga center referred us to. So my husband, after his surgery, didn't take chemotherapy because he was given the choice. And we took Chinese medicine instead.
Yeah.
right? And that may have made all the difference because, putting his body through chemo would have had all kinds of other repercussions. So, and then, we were both so open to Chinese philosophy, Tao, etc., because that yoga had kind of begun that for us. And in a way, Vijay remembered that he comes from actually a very spiritual family. There are saints in his family and so on. But he'd kind of chosen to forget all about that because he had gone full corporate. But with the cancer, yeah, with the cancer, I think, and seeing me so anchored in yoga, I think he was all ready to remember and reconnect with his own yogic experience, practice, and what existed in his own system. And he went back to his guru, and he got his mantra for his practice. And so you're right. I think the cancer came just in time after there was enough of a safety net, a grace net that had been put together for us.
And that's I think also worth underscoring, is that a lot of times we think, oh, well, if I get a meditation practice and I'm a good girl or a good boy, then everything in my life is going to go great. And a lot of times it can be that test or trial that comes up in a moment when we have kind of purified ourselves. We have been working to align. And so thank you.
I must share, this song is really beating in my head right now. It's in Hindi. I would go and listen to it every time I was like thinking I'm going to drown and this pain is too much, because it's been very hard afterwards. With the cancer comes PTSD, right? You're also psychologically hit, and we had to give up this huge lifestyle we had and return to India. And it was very hard. The marriage went through a very, very difficult time. So when all that was happening, I would go listen to this one song. It's called Jab Nav Hi Jal Mein Chhod Di, which means it's this singer who is basically taking on the spiritual life, okay? And he says, effectively, I'm putting my boat into the river and turning it towards the storm.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And then he says, Jab Shankar Roop ho gaye to Rakh kya Shringar kya. Meaning, he says, if I've decided to become Shiva, which is the unconditioned one, then what is the ash and what is the makeup that, to beautify myself? Like, they are the same. Whether I cake myself with makeup to look pretty or I smear myself with ash, because I've chosen to become Shiva. I've chosen to become the unconditioned self.
The cosmic dancer, right? All the functions, right? Creation, destruction, concealing, revealing, preserving.
What that song would remind me is that don't think the spiritual life is going to protect you from, the challenges. In fact, you are going even deeper towards your perfect storm.
Yeah.
And so, just buckle up and face it.
People ask me a lot of times about my journey, both as a spiritual student and an entrepreneur as a woman, in every sense. One thing I say to them over and over again is the times I have felt closest to God are the times that I have been on my knees, right? That everything, all my illusions of self have been ripped away, my illusions about the world. And I really hear that in your transparency, right? That it's into the storm and it's a high holy moment.
And though I wouldn't wish it on anybody, when I look back and I see the storms that came in my life on the trot every 10 years, whether it's my mother's breast cancer when I was 15, or my father's near fatal car accident when I was 25, and Vijay's cancer when I was 35, and my own complete breakdown and resurrection of the marriage when I was 45, which was like a huge death for me, right? So I joke I'm in my fourth marriage with the same man.
Will you talk about how you redesigned the relationship? Because that is so inspiring. So many of us get locked into a dance with a partner, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, etc., or family. And we think that the roles we have and these patterns that we have are set in stone. And I love this story because it really speaks to our ability to change by design with each other.
Yeah. And again, I must say, I'm very fortunate that I have a partner who has a very deep spiritual core, and his levels of integrity are very high.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen all too many relationships and marriages not last and not survive because one of the partners was not able to rise to that level of integrity and authenticity. So I guess I just lucked on. I was 19 when I fell in love with him. I was barely 22 when I married. What did I know, right? So it could have turned out very badly. But I really believe, and again, I'm sure this is also some kind of a karmic soul connection that we have. But I joke that the first marriage was of two happy codependents.
Mm.
Oh, you're so amazing. Oh, you're so amazing. And you're like, kind of, you complete me. Right? And then
with the violin playing, la 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 la.
And then after cancer was the second, which was two very unhappy codependents, because now I became a caregiver and he had to be dependent on me for his emotional care. And for a man, that must have been awful, because at a time when he's going through such a deconstruction and reconstruction of his identity, so that was very, very hard, and we kind of just hung in there just through grace, I would think. And then the third was breaking free of that. When I just said, I can't walk two steps behind someone who's going through his own stuff.
Yeah.
And I need to get on with my life, right? And so I thank God through all this on the work front. Work was great. We were able to hold the family together. We were able to do work. All that didn't suffer. It's just the relationship that the world doesn't get to see, right? That was going through this difficult time. And so I realized that somewhere in years of becoming a full-time caregiver, I had lost myself. And that voice again, Nilima, this is not it either. You're here to make a difference. And it's not this. It's not this either. Now, I thought maybe this is my life's work. I created an integrative medicine program for cancer. And then we wrote our first book, My Cancer is Me. The journey of all these cancer patients that we were taking through. And I really gave my heart and soul to that cancer work. And then it was that, no, this isn't mine. It may be his because he's gone through, it's not mine. And then I had that famous dream, which I've talked about in many different, podcasts and things, where I'm in the White House and I'm the Barack Obama. And then he asked me sarcastically, what do you do? And I said, I work for the empowerment of women and to bring the wisdom of India to the world. And even as I'm saying those words in the dream, I'm shocked at myself because I was doing none of this. I was doing cancer work. Right? So
it's so good. It's just so good because you listen and you're open.
When I said, oh my God, life's passing, I'm not getting any younger, I've been given my Adesh, I've been given my purpose, my dream spoke to me. So get on with it, Nilima. So by this time, we'd started this Chitta Sangha, this group of conscious leadership facilitators and coaches. And I met Raj Sisodia through that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to him, I said, will you write this book with me? I need to write this book that will be a model for leadership that works for not just men, but also for women.
Yeah.
And works not just for the West, but also the East.
Mm-hmm.
We need a conscious leadership model, which is your first tenet of conscious capitalism. And to his great credit, he said, sure, Nilima, happy to. And he changed my life. And I first asked my own husband to say, let's write the second book together, right? But we had just written My Cancer Is Me. So he was a little booked out. He said, no, I'm just a bit tired. I don't want to get into another project.
I love it. You go change the world by yourself, babe.
Yeah. And I asked Raj and he said yes. And that just made all the difference. Yeah. Just changed my life.
Well, so I guess my curiosity at this point in the story is you've written a book about cancer. You start a holistic center for cancer. Had both of you stopped your corporate work by this time?
So we started Roots and Wings Consulting. It was a leadership consultancy advisory. So,
but wait a second. How did you get into leadership from corporate communications and then the cancer? Like, I just want people to feel the dance. Yeah.
He was not just an ad executive.
Okay.
He had his role with Ogilvy from very early years. He was with them for like 20 years or something like that. So he was always handling the leadership training component for Ogilvy at a regional level, Asia Pacific level. So, I mean, he was very much already trained in the most cutting edge leadership practices and coaching and so on. And then I had trained as a yoga teacher by then. So I was bringing a very yogic approach to leadership. Because my interest wasn't leadership per se. My interest was conscious leadership.
Conscious leadership.
Right?
So we have a funny story because you are a student of the mother and Aurobindo. And right when I was starting my company, I went to Pondicherry. And before I went to Auroville, because I was curious about Auroville, I popped into their old ashram in Pondicherry. And I'm looking through all the books. I walk through the grounds and it's just simple, really simple, but beautiful and great energy, really peaceful to be there. And at the end of it, and my heart's full, I wander into the bookstore and there's a book called I think it was Management by Consciousness. Yes. And it was such a message to me because I had just started the company and I wanted to take these tools into corporations, and I'm holding this book and I'm like, yes, I can do this. So I love it that you just use exactly that phrase.
So not only was I bringing my yoga and the yoga philosophy to leadership work that we were doing, because of our background, we already had very good blue chip clients. I mean, that was never a problem. We always had that network, right? Yeah. And then I was also training in dance therapy and drama therapy and Vijay did the Enneagram, and so I started bringing this very different approach to leadership training.
Mhm.
So that's what made our repertoire quite unique.
So you never had to worry about money? Blessings.
Now, let me tell you, my husband and my son recently did a very sweet interview. I don't know if you watched that. It's called Talking About My Generation. So they had a conversation on money. And that's the first time I heard Vijay say to my son that moving back from the expat job to India, said we went down to 20% of our income. Okay. But because we moved back to India, where the cost of living is lower, and we were in Bangalore where we already had, remember my fancy corporate job, I had already bought the flat. So, we had this beautiful home, this yoga hall and meditation garden, and it was literally paradise for 9 years. And the children went to international schools and, left for, my son did his master's from Yale. My daughter's currently in Rotterdam, Erasmus, doing her master's. So on paper, really, we did not give up anything in terms of lifestyle or, I know Vijay knows, by the way, in our marriage is still a little old fashioned. He handles the money and I'm very happy because I can get on and do my fun stuff and not get into all that. So I'm deeply grateful to him for that. But so, he may say that he felt the pressure of, but then I was saying, you know what, if this was 20%, wow.
Yeah.
And to me, that 20% was still making us perhaps in the top 1% of this country.
Well, yeah. It says a lot about just the world, like the relativity of it. Yeah.
Having said that, I must say that, I did realize that I need to also not just enjoy myself and just do my yoga and do my own fun classes and my women's circles, but I need to also start contributing to the family income.
Yeah.
And I always did. It's just that because he had such a good income anyway, that I gave it up to start my yoga, etc. when we were in London and in Hong Kong. But coming back to Bangalore, I said, okay, I'm going to make sure I'm going to also contribute on this. So I've gone out of my way to make sure I get paid what I need to.
Yeah.
And what I deserve.
Yeah. So when you decided to take on really aggregating the breadth of your life experiences and your knowledge and apply them to creating, let's say, a counter model to a lot of the OG, right, the old guard assumptions about leadership. Like, I know about the dream and Barack Obama, and I love that dream. but I'm curious, was it inspired by observations that you had in the corporate world? Were there things that were kind of pulling you forward to say, it doesn't have to be this way? And
you remember why I left ESPN with that, oh my God, is this it? There must be something worth living for, even something worth dying for, because my soul was aching, right? Because it was such a toxic kind of culture in many ways. It was a lot of fun as well, but the leadership, and it was just lack of leadership, lack of people nurturing and people growing. There was none of that. And so I knew there must be a better way, and that's what that Charles' handy hungry spirit had kind of pointed me to.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that we need workplaces can also, even though Vijay had this incredible career and work with Ogilvy, he got cancer. What does that say, right? That somewhere our corporate jobs are burning us out. So
Literally, yeah.
So I knew that all these things that we were learning in order for Vijay to regain his health would apply just as much to leadership.
Yeah.
And the workplace.
Yeah.
And so whether it was, I went and practiced with a Sufi master, and I learned these incredible techniques to lighten up and not take yourself seriously. And I would bring that to the corporate training. I went and did some body work and movement, and I got all these senior corporates rolling on the floor on beautiful earth, and then I would see them shift and feel different. And so I was getting very convinced that everything that we were learning to regain our health and even our relationship had to be transferred to the workplace.
Yeah. And you've done it. Her book, if you are watching this and you have not ever cracked it open, is an amazing synthesis of East and West, of Jungian, of Hindu wisdom. I mean, it literally draws from every school of wisdom I've ever studied. And it is very honoring of the beautiful aspects of a nurturing male, right? It's very honoring that either of the genders, as you can typify them, and speaking in that kind of a framework, right, can be toxic. It's not just male toxicity, right? That there's also female. I mean, what I love about what you created is you created almost a map to me, right? It's really a map of the choices of how to be as we move through managing our lives and managing our impact on the organization and on the world, and the deep respect that you have baked into it, that everyone is starting from where they're starting from, and that there is a wealth of possibility, right? We always think, oh, well, I'm 40 and this is how my life is, or I'm 50, or I'm 25 and terrified, and so I just have to do it the way it's going to be safe. Like the notion of sovereignty and active choice making is the other thing I really love in your model.
So thanks for reminding me to then, acknowledge the inspiration for this. So you mentioned Sri Aurobindo and the mother.
Yes.
And their entire yoga is called the integral yoga.
Yes.
And as practitioners of the integral yoga, we are told, go out there and learn from the best of all the wisdom traditions, ancient and modern. Draw from all of them and create your own unique synthesis that works for you. Yeah. So that synthetic ability is something I've always had and loved doing. And luckily, my husband's of the same thinking as well. So for health, we created an integrative medicine program that draws from Chinese medicine, Jungian psychology, yoga, you name it. And therefore, equally for growth and leadership, we created this integral leadership model. Mm-hmm. And if Shakti leadership had to be given another name, I would have called it integral leadership.
Yeah.
Because it's truly integrating the best of ancient, modern, east, west, north, south.
But the cool thing about the underlying mandate, right, to go out into the world, learn as much as you can, and synthesize it. So many people are looking for answers, right? And if they become affiliated with a line of faith or a school of wisdom, there are teachings out there that this is how you do it, and anything that's not this is counter, etc. And so the ecumenical spirit, right? The idea that wisdom can be gleaned across cultures and across practices is, for one thing, it's hugely empowering. It's also, you can't be passive, right? You can't just say, oh, well, these are the rules.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I was remembering we nowadays teach a workshop called the Inclusive Eye, how to hold identity lightly. And
I love that. What is that? Who? You're teaching that?
Yes.
I want to do that. I love that.
It's amazing. We've done it twice already now, and I'm happy to share the link with you and let you know the next time we're doing it live. And then we talk about the levels of development, right? That we go from this very exclusive self, which is a very contracted self, where it's this narcissistic I. And then we go to the, the us and them self, right? And then we go to the, what we call the it consciousness, the scientific self, where, we're all kind of made of the same things and laws of nature apply to all of us. And then from there, we expand into the we self, which is we realize, we're all different, but we can be interconnected and so on. And we have to exchange and acknowledge all of us. And then the integral self is the oneness self, where we realize actually we are just one. So we have always sought to operate from the we and the one, and saying, and in that level of consciousness, you can hold everything can get included if you find its right place, in your mandala, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it requires a certain cultivation of a way of seeing. We call it the inclusive eye, which is also the eye that can include everything.
I get it. I do get it. Well, I feel like what you have shared is not only a life of rugged individuality, but also grace. And I definitely honor you as a teacher, as a cosmic dancer, and as exactly that special change maker that your mom was told that you would be. And I thank you so much for taking time to share all that. So,
Mom, it's been a delight just having someone like you interview me, because you're someone who has done it all herself, and so you would get it. This is a very peer interview for me, so thank you.
Yeah. Well, so you people out there, if you want to know more about her, Google Shakti Leadership. And she is running, the fellowship is going to happen this year?
Next year, 21.
Okay. So I've done this. It's a fabulous soak into other viewpoints on self, on leadership, on life, and it's very inclusive in the eye. So definitely check that out. And if you have asked questions on any of the platforms and we haven't gotten to them real time, it's a glitch. They happen, and both of us will look through the threads and answer anything that needs answering. And meanwhile, Monday, I have Jeff Thompson. He's an NYPD detective. He's a meditator. He has worked as a mediator. He is a crisis counselor. He is a professor. He is part of the research faculty at Columbia University's medical school, I believe. He studied suicide. He's such a fabulous person. He's a lifelong practitioner of mindfulness practices, and he brings that into every single thing he does. So we are going to have a beautiful, beautiful conversation with him. And Nilima, thank you again. And thank you, all of you, whoever showed up. Thanks for being along on the journey, because I really feel like the more of us that have conversations about our journey and our choices and our freedom, the more we're going to act on that freedom. So thanks for being along. Bye, everybody.